Joint Committee now resumes consideration of the issue of the draft Greater Dublin Area Transport Strategy. I would like to welcome from Dublin Bus Mr. Ray Coyne, CEO, and from Dublin Commuter Coalition, Mr. Feljin Jose. Am I pronouncing that correctly? Feljin Jose. Feljin Jose. Chairperson, and Ms. Janis Morrissey, Committee Member. You're both all very welcome, and thank you for your forbearance. We just put the vote in the door. It just inadvertently interrupted proceedings. Note and privilege. All witnesses are reminded alongside parliamentary practice that you should not criticise or make charges against any person or entity but in such a way as to make him, her, or it identifiable, otherwise engage in speech to my regards damage to the good name of the person or entity. Therefore, if your statements are presented to a family in relation to an identified person or entity, you will be directed to continue your remarks and imperative that you comply with any such direction. If witnesses attending remotely outside the Leinster House campus, there are some limitations to parliamentary privilege, and as such may not benefit from the same level of immunity from legal proceedings as the witness physically present does. Witnesses participating in this committee session from a jurisdiction outside the state are advised that they should also be mindful of the domestic law and how it may apply to the evidence they give. Members are reminded alongside parliamentary practice to the effect that they should not comment on, criticise or make charges against a person outside the House or an official by name such to make him or her identifiable. I'd like to remind members of the constitutional requirement that members must be physically present within the confines of the Leinster House complex in order to participate in public meetings. Locally, I will not permit a member to participate where they are not adhering to this constitutional requirement. Therefore, any member who attempts to participate from outside the precinct will be asked to leave the meeting. In this regard, I would ask any member partaking via MS Teams that prior to making their contribution to the meeting that you confirm your underground Leinster House campus. If attending the committee room, you are asked to exercise personal responsibility to protect yourself versus the risk of contacting COVID-19. Now I invite Mr. Coyne to make his opening statement. Mr. Coyne.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you for the invitation to speak today about the transport strategy for the Greater Dublin Area. I and the 3,600 strong team in Dublin Bus were in the business of contributing to evidence-based informed policy making. Why is that important? Because we are ambitious to have an integrated public policy and better outcomes for the people of Dublin. That means that we need to start thinking now about Dublin's transport future. The prospects are good, but only if we can plan ahead. At the heart of this, for us in public transport, is the vitally important Greater Dublin Transport Area strategy. Public transport, as we all know, is key to our sustainable development of Ireland and the continued economic prosperity of our people. Our buses are more than just a means of transporting people across the capital. They are vital to connecting communities with good amenities and good jobs. The centrality of public transport to our lives and the success of our country means we need to broaden the conversation on transport policy, so I welcome the opportunity to appear here today. Before casting our eye to the future, I believe it's important to highlight the progress made in recent years. Over the last 7 years, we have reinvented, strengthened and modernised our services and our company. We've been independently recognised as Ireland's best Indigenous employer. Customer numbers have gone from 122 million to a pre-pandemic high of 139 million customers in 2019. Today, the company is Ireland's largest public transport provider, carrying over 70 million customers in 2021. And we do hope to get back to over 150 million customers travelling per year as our society recovers from the pandemic. With the introduction of 5 new 24-hour routes alongside our nightlink services, we have begun the process of introducing all-day and all-night services across the capital. And we've done this whilst facing the most difficult of headwinds, a once-in-a-lifetime pandemic and the challenges posed by Brexit. I'd like to take this opportunity to recognise the commitment and skill of the Dublin Bus team who are vital to our success. Whether they work maintaining, driving, cleaning our buses or working on our customer support teams, we wouldn't be able to run a high-quality bus service without them. This progress has, of course, been achieved in cooperation with the NTA and Government. In our submission to the NTA, we focus on the full delivery of bus connects, delivery of sustainable bus services which meets our climate change requirements, the future when it comes to technology and new customer service offerings, and short to medium-term improvements to bus services and the broader operating environment. By focusing on these goals, it provides the opportunity for us all to play our part so that we can secure the gains which have been achieved for the thousands of workers across the public transport industry. In terms of bus connects, this is key to building on our recent progress within this project. It is a key part of the GDA transport strategy to improve public transport and address climate change in Dublin and other cities across Ireland. Dublin Bus is assisting the NTA with the implementation of bus connects, in terms of the area network redesign. We have successfully implemented phases 1 and 2 of the network redesign. We look forward to assisting the NTA with phase 3 in the coming weeks, and then we'll have phase 4 and 5 the second half of 2022. The successful delivery of Bus Connects is vital to the future of Dublin Bus, and it's also critical to achieving the company's goal of being the state's primary delivery partner of choice. With the bus currently, and will remain so, the largest public transport mode, it is vital that Bus Connects is fully implemented during the 2022-2030 period. In terms of immediate measures, it is our view that a number of solutions could be put in place in the short to medium term, which will improve the urban bus public transport, the public realm, enhance the customer experience and increase the use of sustainable public transport. These measures will provide mobility for the many for the benefit of all, and they will help support the GDA transport strategy. These include exploring additional bus-based projects, additional 24-hour services and strengthen and protect bus lane priority. With regards to additional bus-based projects, many service initiatives and infrastructure projects as part of the ambitious transport strategy for the GDA will take time to deliver. The bus is the most cost-effective and most flexible mass public transport offering. Encouraging customers to use public transport is a key requirement for a sustainable future. In advance of a new fixed line rails or metro, investment should be focused on building public transport patronage on identified corridors and then migrating customers to the fixed rail and metro systems. Buses with high level of service and demand responsive transit have a role to play and can be introduced in advance of and then realigned post-rail metro construction. This will give significant benefits to communities long before the introduction of rail-based services. With regards to 24-hour services, there's a strong need for stakeholders across the society to work together. Whether it's public health, climate change, economic modernisation or public transport, there's a growing expectation that businesses have a role to play in addressing the broader economic and societal issues. At the heart of this must be all partners working to deliver a truly 24-hour Dublin. High-quality 24-hour bus services are needed to deliver all-day and all-night city. It is our view and in our report that the broader economic needs of the city justify accelerating the introduction of 24-hour services and routes such as the 46A, 155 and many others, Chair. This will allow operators and customers to build on the success of our existing 24-hour services on 15, 39A, 41, C1, C2, plus C5 and C6. In terms of 30 years ago, Chair, we introduced our first bus lane on Parliament Street. And that transformed bus services across the capital that we see today. We need those bus lanes to be protected. We also need them to be improved. And when it comes to bus lane enhancement, we believe it is appropriate to move away from time-specific bus lanes towards 24-hour designation for all bus lanes all days of the week. Over the last 2 years, we've seen a significant increase in the number of people cycling. This is good for Dublin. It makes the city quieter, more efficient and a nicer place to live. People must be able to cycle safely in the capital. Public transport like companies like Dublin Bus and cyclists are natural allies in the fight for more sustainable Dublin. We have and will continue to support the introduction of appropriate cycling infrastructure across the GDA. The pandemic period was a particularly tough one for businesses across the GDA. A key question for Dublin Bus now is how we can help support economic recovery as normal activity levels resume. We obviously have a key role to play in public transport and bringing people into the city centre and other urban hubs across the GDA. But we can also use our size and scale to make the GDA a nicer place to live, work and visit. Over the last few months, we've seen increasingly pedestrianisation of streets, Marion Row and Capel Street being most recent examples, and other public realms have changed and reclaimed for people and business. Dublin Bus is supportive of this emerging trend, and we hope to see consensus reached between all partners regarding the increased pedestrianisation of Capel Street and South William Street. So I think Capel Street is done. These are just some of the short-term measures, Chair, that could be used to help improve the customer experience and increase public transport usage, which we all know is vital to building more sustainable Dublin. If we do not take these steps, we will inevitably see congestion worse, we will see commute times get longer, we will see emissions rise in line with population growth. In terms of embracing technology to create and both capture value, over many years we've seen the benefits of embracing technology in our lives and in our business. At its purest form, technology makes things easier to use and by design better. We've seen the benefits of technology in the transport industry over many years, leading to greater accessibility of our buses through access ramps, induction loops, audio announcements, colour contrasting interiors, through zero tailpipe emissions buses on order, through traffic light priority for public transport and timely information for customers. We are now at a time where technology and transport industries are significantly integrating. If we can plan together and capture the benefits that technology and transport can offer, we can facilitate modal shift and achieve our climate target challenges. Short-term initiatives include the use of account-based ticketing, where your token can be a smartphone, a smartwatch, debit card, a QR code, and which in March the Government have agreed funding to progress on the next generation ticketing project as part of Bus Connects. Account-based ticketing will also provide faster journey times, allow for dynamic pricing and demand management. It will also provide a single payment system for the whole transport network, and you can give you the cheapest fare for the journey undertaken in real time. Account-based ticketing can also significantly simplify and enhance the customer experience, and also provide significant insights through data that could further benefit our customers. It is also part of an ecosystem that is emerging called MaaS, which is Mobility as a Service. This is next level integration, where a single payment system will allow multiple transport options to be selected on demand by use. And this would include your bike share, car share, e-bikes, e-scooters, micro-mobility, taxis, public and private operators. Technology will also provide a platform for enhanced reliability and efficiency of service provision through greater use of data, analytics and artificial intelligence. Historically, traditional companies have not been imaginative enough with their assets and the benefits that technology can bring. There's an opportunity for Dublin Bus to further build on its reputation through the early adoption of new technology to create and capture value for our customers and the state. Examples include the use of predictive maintenance to increase reliability and real-time capacity deployment to meet customer needs as they arise. Technology is also an enabler for the sustainable development of our city by assisting with increased movements by way of an integrated multimodal public transport system. Many transport users are also car users, and they will also have a need for public and private modes in our cities. We must ensure priority is given to high-capacity transport modes, but that it works in harmony. We will need to achieve modal shift in an appropriately managed fashion. This will require consensus on the introduction of demand management principles in our city, which technology can facilitate. Examples include fixed automatic number plate recognition, curbside management services, bus-only roads, time-bound congestion dependent as needed, dynamic road speeds for all vehicles, end-to-end priority for public transport modes, congestion charging, and the introduction of demand-responsive transit. Many of these opportunities will require us to be both learners and leaders, but I'm confident that we are ready. Dublin Bus is accelerating plans and working with partners to harness the potential of demand-responsive transit and other transport innovations. It is my firm belief that the technology and innovations are there to deliver during the lifetime of the strategy, but only if consensus can be reached. In conclusion, Chair, in a world that is changing before our very eyes, it is right that we think about and plan for the long term. Dublin Bus believes that the NTA's ambitious GDA transport strategy will make a significant contribution to the economic, mobility and sustainability needs of a thriving, ambitious and progressive city. The years up to 2042 will see us operate in an environment where economic and social development has a significant impact on the role of public transport. Investing in transport is key to our continued economic growth and to delivering sustainable jobs now and in the future. This means we, as advocates for a public transport and for a better GDA, we must be proactive in providing the city with modern, dynamic mobility solutions. Dublin Bus is a solutions provider, and it is in this spirit that we've engaged with this strategy. While there is no doubt that external factors will reshape our region, the GDA that emerges over the lifetime of this strategy must be more livable and must be more sustainable. To do this, we must develop more livable communities where businesses can flourish and people can use buses, bikes, e-scooters and their own feet to get around. In the more immediate term, we must look at bus-based measures that will help the GDA recover from the economic impact of the pandemic and ward off the growing threat of congestion. Now is not the time to place a limit on our ambition for the transport GDA. We must embrace technology as a means to removing barriers to public transport. The ability to easily pay for and use public transport will be essential if we are to attract people back to our services. Beyond this, Dublin Bus believes that the continued investment in public transport through Bus Connects, combined with an increased willingness to accelerate many of the measures set out in the 2022-2042 strategy, will transform the GDA. That's the ultimate prize for investment in public transport and the creation of a successful GDA, which is a better place to live, a better place to visit and a better place to work. It's not just a better public transport system. I'd like to thank you for taking the time to listen, Chair, and happy to take any questions that you may have.
Thanks very much, Mr. Kyle. That was a busy bus journey, if I say so. You covered a multitude. I'll now go to Mr. Jose. Mr. Jose, your opening statement.
Thank you, Chairman and members of the committee, for the invitation to speak today on what we regard has a great opportunity to improve the lives of those in the Greater Dublin Area. My name is Feljin Jose. I'm the Chairperson of Dublin Commuter Coalition, and I'm joined here today by Janis Morrissey from our committee. Dublin Commuter Coalition is a voluntary advocacy group established in 2018 to act as a unifying voice for sustainable transport users in the Greater Dublin Area. Despite our name, we don't advocate just for commuters, but for everyone in the GDA who walks, cycles, scoots, or uses public transport. We represent the lived experiences of our members, from parents who want their children to walk or cycle to school independently, to people who cross the city each day for work or college, and older citizens who need reliable and accessible connections to their local shops and to their friends and family. Our vision is for Dublin to have a transport network that is safe, accessible, connected, and sustainable. We work to realise our vision through meetings with policymakers and engaging with public bodies, as well as by being a voice for sustainable transport in social and traditional media. When we were founded, the future of transport in Dublin looked bleak. There were very few public transport or active travel projects in progress, and we spent most of our time countering objections or misinformation about what little was proposed. In just over 3 years, this has changed dramatically. The calls to strengthen public transport infrastructure have only grown louder as the climate crisis has become more urgent and the many benefits of sustainable transport are becoming more widely recognised. We're pleased to see the rollout of the new Bus Connects network and the submission of planning applications for Bus Connects core bus corridors. For us, this is a culmination of over 3 years of advocacy on different strands of Bus Connects. The introduction of the new 90-minute fare, which enables free transfer between buses and rail services, maximises the utility of the existing network by making multi-stage journeys easier and significantly cheaper. We're seeing very positive feedback on this, and we hope to see it expanded to more areas around Dublin. We're also seeing a much greater appetite for safe active travel infrastructure, and are pleased with the substantial increase in the planning and delivery of pedestrianised streets and segregated cycle routes. On the GDA transport strategy, we have submitted our response to the public consultation on the draft transport strategy for the Greater Dublin Area as a briefing document for members of this committee. During the initial public consultation, 90% of respondents said that the transport strategy should seek to reduce the reliance on private cars for travel in the GDA. While the draft transport strategy gets a lot of things right, it is less progressive than the previous strategies at a time when the Dublin people, and indeed our planet, demands the most ambition. Our biggest concerns are with the slow and vague timelines provided and the removal of 2 vital projects. People in Dublin are increasingly frustrated with how long it takes to design, plan and build transport projects. We believe that the timelines for delivery of projects in the draft transport strategy are far too slow. Given Ireland's climate commitments and the growing demands to decrease air pollution, travel times and costly car dependency, we had hoped that the NTA would seek to accelerate some of these projects. However, we have seen no evidence of any accelerated delivery in the draft transport strategy. For example, the sum of the Lewis lines proposed to be built by 2042 in the draft transport strategy is the same as what was proposed to be built by 2035 in the previous transport strategy. A new line to Lucan and small extensions to Finglas, Poolbeg and Bray. While we are concerned with how slow the projects are and the general lack of urgency, we're also concerned with the vague timelines given. The draft transport strategy divides projects into 2 groups depending on when they're due to be finished, 2022 to 2030 and 2031 to 2042. Beyond this, it's not clear when the projects listed will be completed. For example, the people of Navan were told that their rail line would finally be built, but they don't know if it'll be built 10 years from now or 20 years from now. It's very difficult to bring communities along on these large projects with such vague timelines. They don't instill any confidence in the projects themselves, and people find it hard to believe that they will ever be built. A notable omission from the draft transport strategy is the Darpris Tunnel, which was previously known as Dart Underground. This project would completely transform the Eastern Rail network by connecting the Cork and Kildare line to the Northern line, which stops right in the heart of Dublin. The previous transport strategy planned to complete this crucial piece of infrastructure before 2035, but the draft transport strategy postpones it for at least the next 20 years. This delay exemplifies the lack of urgency and leadership evident throughout the document. This year marks 50 years since the tunnel was first proposed. The Lewis Green line between Charlemont and Sandyford was built with the intention that it would eventually be upgraded from a tram to a metro. The previous transport strategy proposed to link this high-capacity section of the Lewis Green line to the new high-capacity metro at Charlemont to create one long metro corridor from Swords to Sandyford as originally intended for relatively little additional cost. Housing developments along this corridor have already been built on the promise that this line will be upgraded, but this essential upgrade is now noticeably absent from the draft transport strategy. We believe that it is also important to acknowledge that the strategy is better than the previous strategy in some areas. We welcome changes such as the extension of Dart to Sallins, Wicklow and Kilcock, the inclusion of the Navan rail line and the removal of the Eastern Bypass. In conclusion, we believe that the draft transport strategy falls well short of what is needed to facilitate the radical shift away from private cars to sustainable modes that is required to meet our climate commitments and reduce congestion, air pollution and inactivity. We're seeking substantial changes to the plan before it is finalised and approved by the Minister. With greater ambition, the transport strategy can be a catalyst for change, and Dublin can be a leader in the provision of safe, accessible and sustainable transport for all. The people of the Greater Dublin Area demand and deserve it.
Thanks very much, Mr. Jose. Now I'll move to members. First member is Deputy Darren O'Rourke. And I'm conscious of time, about 5 minutes.
Yeah, no problem. I'll just move straight into questions then. For Mr. Coyne, first of all, you hope to be back to over 150 million customers per year. When do you think, what sort of timeline are you on? What sort of numbers are you seeing? And maybe just your experience of the 90-minute, and you don't yet have the introduction of the reduced fares. They're coming in soon enough, are they? And just have you maybe just your sense of how that will impact? Maybe that's not a fair question, but maybe the piece in the 90-minute. You talk about the need for achieving consensus. Maybe some of your thoughts in relation to that, and then looking into the future, mobility as a service and demand responsive transport. That'll be a departure for yourselves. We're quite familiar with it in local link and other areas. Just how you see that playing a role in a Dublin context. And maybe we'll come back to yourselves then with other questions. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you, Deputy. Just in terms of the 150 million timeline, we're back at around just shy of 80% customers now, pre-COVID. But we are increasing significantly under bus connects, the service level. So we'd anticipate being there within the next 2 years. The travel demands within that, though, will be significantly different than they were pre-COVID. So with hybrid working, so we've to see how that plays out long term. So we do see the numbers increasing, but the travel patterns are likely to shift. So that'll be a learning exercise over the next year. So hopefully within 2 years. But that would be subject to, obviously, continued funding in public transportation. And one of the key elements within that is multi-year funding, which allows us to plan many years in advance with security of funding there to
Do you have that now?
No, it's an annual cash cycle. So we couldn't commit to what services we would introduce next year until we see what value is there. So, but the multi-year is important because it allows the state, the operators, the NTA, government to tell a story, tell a long-term story, and give people certainty of when they're making decisions to buy, private cars, etc., that you say, look, you will have these services in X, Y, Z number of years for a long time. So that is important. So, but hopefully in 2 years, Deputy, for the 150 million. The 90-minute fare has been welcome. You cannot give enough information out to customers, so we will continue with the NTA to advise customers of that, but it's been broadly welcomed. It will assist with kind of changing habits, particularly the younger generation, and trying to get them to continue to use the bus. It's easier to have a customer stay with a bus than to attract a customer onto public transport, from a cost point of view. That'll be true of any industry and any business. So that will help us hold on to customers, and it has been welcome. With the new fares, the Minister will be making an announcement on that, so I wouldn't be at liberty to announce that when it's coming in, but it is imminent. And, so Dublin Bus, that will give a significant reduction, 20% reduction on all our machines. So, we're ready and essentially waiting to implement that. We'll implement that overnight once we're advised. We just is through a wireless system on our buses, despite reports in the media. That's what it is. So,
and it might get you back your 150 million a little bit quicker.
Yeah, it's an interesting one. Look, the elasticity of price and passengers used to be around 0.3, so for 100, a 30% reduction or increase in passengers. But what we'll see, you will get an increase in passenger numbers, but what we're really targeting is modal shift. And cheaper fares don't necessarily get you modal shift. They get you more journeys, but so instead of walking 500 metres, you might jump in the bus because it's kind of 60 cent or it's €1. Yeah. That's what happens. If you want modal shift.
Do you track that? Do you track taking people out of cars? And
yeah, so, we do surveys on people out of cars, but what we can do is we can track the length, the journeys that people make. So what you would see in a city centre, we will be tracking how many increased journeys are done in a small confined space within the city centre. So if there's more journeys kind of within a kilometre of the GPO, they're generally not car users. Yeah. If there's no subsequent increase from the suburbs in. So we'll be able to find that from a micro level. We can dig down into that. But there would be an expectation with the fares reduction that there will be an increase. Absolutely. But, globally, it doesn't result in, on its own, it doesn't result in modal shift, which is what we really want to achieve, rather than just, people using the bus more often, because it's actually taken away from the government strategy, which is walking, healthy travel at the top of the pyramid, so it can actually counteract that. So, but it will be welcome. There's no question about that.
And mobility as a service and demand responsive?
Yeah, just on the consensus bit, and before that, I'll just so the consensus bit is kind of into what I mentioned earlier on the multi-year funding, and that's if all parties have an agreement, the business, government, operators, and the funding is there to underpin it, of what we're trying to aspire to, and then just kind of laser vision and all move towards it. Far easier than all disparate parts kind of having different views. Like it's public transport and private transport and business. There's going to be different views, but there needs to be some kind of look. This is what's best for the vast majority, and doesn't really impact negatively the other people. So I think that's what I mean by consensus. That at least if people have a fair win behind us, everyone can kind of make a significant beneficial impact. And without, you don't want to do that to a disbenefit to a large proportion of society. That's not useful, So on the MAS and DRT, so MAS would be essentially it's a technology platform, and all your public transport and private modes, and you would use it through one app. It's an app. So if you want to rent a car, use a. So if I want to use 6 bus journeys this week, 2 train journeys, 4 e-scooters, use 7 bikes, I can plug that in and I go, okay, I don't have to buy, a monthly ticket or a weekly ticket for this, have a weekly ticket for that. So I kind of pick and choose. And the technology system is the enabler for that. And then what you would have is, you'd have somebody like the Transport Authority, or if somebody else was asked to implement it, you would kind of be the keeper of the brand. So you'd only let really good operators into that system that are investing in their own service, and that the big spectrum within that. So account-based ticketing is part of that, but there's a big spectrum. So I think there's a choice to make for government of what policy they want to pursue within that area. There's some areas that are pursuing it quite aggressively, but again, this will be around modal shift, giving people alternative options that are better than private mode, and also recognising that we're all going to still need a private car for some element. Not all of us, but a lot of us still need a private car. So we're not going to do away with that. But can we minimise the journey and make the alternative journeys as attractive as the car? MAS will help do that as well.
Yeah, even in terms of
DRT, so demand responsive transport. Again, it's around technology and transport merging. So in an urban environment, what you could have is localised service. So again, the DRT piece is you have your app. So it's not door to door, it's kind of corner to corner, dynamic bus route, so it's not a fixed route. And it depends on how much resource people want to put into it, but you could set it that when you request the bus, it'll be there guaranteed within 20 minutes or within 30 or 40, so it depends on how many buses you put into it. And it'll, the algorithm will say, here's the best route, here's how we can pick the people up. You can have smaller buses. You can have driverless buses, which they do in Europe. They have dynamic routes, so you can save money on that. And that would generally feed into a hub and spoke. So if you're out in Stamullen, you might have that sort of system into the rail station or into Swords or something like that. Yeah. And that will connect them in with a bigger transport network. Yeah. But it is dynamic.
And, you know, I've heard those pieces, and they're technology dependent. You know, from Dublin Bus's perspective, what's a realistic time frame? The back end of the decade, or?
We're engaging with entities now to implement as soon as we could possibly
on DRT.
do.
And,
yes.
what about MAS? Back end of the decade.
So MAS would be account-based ticketing is kind of.
Yeah.
You know,
yeah.
is an element
but
of
the
MAS.
integrated piece, you know.
The integrated piece, that you know, that could take, depending on, it'll take legislation change
yeah.
for sure. That could take anywhere between 3 to 5 years. But then to get the whole full system fully operational and everything, so all your attracting operators in and the innovation, you could be looking at a decade, and it's all settled down. And again, that's what's the aspirations of the city. So Finland will be an example people use, but yeah. The government there, to be fair, they put an awful lot of investment into it because the Finnish government were looking for their new kind of Nokia. Yeah, so yeah. This is them trying to do this and then sell that to other cities. Okay. So I think we're on the road to that now, but for full integration, that would be a government decision on how far they want to go. But okay. the ultimate aspiration then is these cities then sell the knowledge to implement that to other cities, and that's how they fund it ultimately. Yeah.
Thanks very much. And for Mr. Jose, thanks very much for your presentation and for your activism. I think you know, it is a really important piece because they're literally contested spaces. So it's important that we have opportunity to hear and deliver on I think the vision that you've set out for the city is one that lots of people would share and are effectively, I think, you know, government and opposition policy, but delivering it seems to be a particular challenge. Maybe if you could just give some experience in terms of the barriers, you point towards the planning system, for example, but also the opportunities that are there, and I might have a chance to get in the second round. Thanks.
The biggest barrier really is just the timelines involved in delivering them. Like you said, we all agree that we need this. We all agree on what the final vision should look like, but getting there seems to be an issue. I think a lot of it is to do with resources at, you know, state body level. Just the amount of resources that it's available.
So funding for like Dublin Bus or NTA or local authorities is
funding is an issue as well, but you know, even for a lot of the projects that are funded, we're still seeing issues in just delivering that. Just Metrolink has been 4 years in design now and planning. So, I mean, I think that's a function of just the resources that are allocated to it. So I think there's scope to speed up things there, but I know at the same time it's really difficult to hire engineers and designers right now as well. So,
and do you think there are opportunities for quick wins? Because obviously there's super projects and they're literally, you know, in the category of mega project, but there's transformational change that potentially could be delivered on, you know, for far less of a budget, and in fairness to the government, they're committing funding. Where do you think that the barriers are there in terms of delivering on the ground, whether it be in terms of cycleways or shared spaces or greenways?
Ray touched on this, just in terms of 24/7 bus lanes. A lot of bus lanes are between 7 o'clock and 9 o'clock, and they're turning to car parking, which doesn't work because the buses run all day, and trying to get through a city centre at 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock it's difficult, not so much a problem in the city centre, but even on the radial routes. And bus lane enforcement, like the bus lanes are there, but they are being abused, and it's well past the time that we rely on the Garda being at every street corner. We have to move on to camera enforcement. The bus is already equipped with cameras. There are cities where they simply just automatically prosecute that, or issue. It's a fixed charge penalty, you know, of €80. It's not a big deal. It can be done automatically. It can be done. I suppose the evidence can be collected automatically and then sent to a Garda or someone else to prosecute, or I shouldn't say prosecute, but to issue the fines. It's something that can be implemented in maybe a year. That could dramatically speed up bus journeys.
Okay.
Just briefly to add to that point, I think another potential area for a quick win would be introduction of a 30km/h zone in urban areas, coming, you know, from an inclusivity and equity point of view. Like as we've illustrated with our scenarios at the start of the statement, we represent, you know, children as much as older people, and I think it's important that the voice of children and young people is included in our conversation today. And there's a real opportunity to create more livable and appropriate spaces for young people to enjoy their local communities, as well as travelling to school and recreational opportunities too. So I'd propose that as another option. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thanks.
We'll now move to Deputy James O'Connor. Deputy O'Connor, are you coming in?
Yes, Chair, if that's okay. Thanks very much. Sorry, no, just to get my lighting right here a bit, because the camera's facing into the window. I just want to thank both contributions there from the Dublin Commuter Coalition and also as well from Dublin Bus. I think it's interesting just to get their perspective on what they feel could be done. And I certainly want to agree with, I think, some of the points that were made by the Dublin Commuters Coalition in relation to, you know, the longevity around the delivery of public transport projects, whether it was the Lewis and other projects as well. And that's a point that we just have to put our hands up and say that it's an unmitigated disaster in Ireland when it comes to delivering infrastructure for public transport in our city centres in particular. And obviously Dublin as a primate city is certainly suffering heavily from congestion in comparison to many other countries within the European Union. One question I'd love to ask the Dublin Commuters Coalition, obviously, as I said in my previous contribution, I'm not sure if they've seen it. I'm guilty as charged, as are many others who are living in rural Ireland and commuting in and out of Dublin City for work. So I'm doing it twice a week, and I'm leaving and coming into Dublin for work. And, you know, just taking public transport for me is just not an option. But, you know, what practical steps do the Dublin Commuters Coalition have when it comes to trying to take off traffic off the road on the M1, M2, M3? You know, you have the N4 as well, and the N7 and the M11. So in terms of the provision of, you know, transit facilities, you know, have you any suggestions in that regard? Because look, basically much of the traffic within Dublin city centre, unfortunately, is coming in as a consequence of people, you know, commuting really from radial towns around the capital city. And obviously, if we want to provide the bus lanes, we want to provide the space for, you know, segregated cycleways and for increased footpath infrastructure as well, which is so badly needed. I think that's quite important. So I might just put that question to the Dublin Commuters Coalition and just to compliment them on their contribution to the committee. Thank you.
Thank you. So in the draft transport strategy, there is regional bus corridors proposed that are basically going from the M50 out to a couple of kilometres out. They're basically, I think, bus lanes on motorways to kind of give bus priority. Like we can't build metros to all of those areas. You know, when you go further out, it does become a very sparsely populated area with loads of different towns. So buses will be a key part of the solution. So making sure that there is adequate bus priority for those buses through the junctions on the dual carriageways coming in and through the M50 and into the city will be a big thing. So you know, Bus Connect looks at mostly inside the M50 area. So it is important to look at the regional bus corridors outside as well. And it is just about building these long-term projects, like, you know, making sure that we're doing it now, starting the design now, planning now, so that we'll have a pipeline of projects to keep funding and keep building when the resources are favourable.
That's great. And something I've noticed, you've run a really strong social media operation, and it's brilliant to see the engagement that you have in it. I follow it. I'm a big fan of it, actually, and I'd love to meet you guys privately as well after the committee meeting or at some stage if there's time available to everybody involved in the Dublin Commuters Coalition. But I suppose, you know, something that I really do feel is a huge problem in Dublin is that, if you want to get to and from your place of work, if you want to get to Dublin for shopping, for example, you know, when it comes to actually deciding, will I take my car or will I take public transport today, the existing palette of options there either take significantly longer or they're just not a nice user experience. And obviously, it's grand if you're living in a town that has the good infrastructure in place, you know, the rail infrastructure. You know, I was talking recently with a colleague of mine at Thomas Byrne, you know, County Meath. They're looking to significantly invest in rail infrastructure in that part of Ireland, and he's working quite hard on that. But, you know, you look at places like Meath, you look across, you know, other parts of Kildare that are not serviced by current rail lines, that, you know, there are many people taking the car option to get in and out of work every day, and it's quite common in Wicklow as well. But I just think we need to see a bit of proactive action there to try and address that, and you're key in relation to that work. The next point, Chairperson, just want to make this is quite important. A really exciting piece of work, and I think we have to support it as best we can from a cross-political point of view, is tidying up the planning process when it comes to the infrastructure development in Ireland. So, for example, for new rail infrastructure, we're relying on old legislation, for example, the rail order. You know, there are significant issues around the longevity and how long that process will take. I just want to ask DCC, you know, are you going to be seeking to get a hearing from the Minister for Transport in relation to that review that's been done by the Attorney General through the Department of Transport and the Minister? And also, I just want to encourage that you will go and do so as well. It'd be quite helpful, perhaps, in the process for that to happen.
We have been following the news on it, but we haven't directly engaged with it. I suppose a lot of it is quite technical and is a little bit beyond our reach as well, but we would absolutely love to learn more about it, and because obviously it's directly applicable to a lot of what we do. We've been kind of waiting to hear more details about it, but we haven't directly engaged, no, but we would like to.
Okay. Look, that's certainly interesting, and the same could be said to Dublin Bus as well, and the NTA and other state agencies that are involved in this work. So effectively, that will be a huge determining factor in the development of all new infrastructure. So we can try and evade, I suppose, get away from situations like metro projects in Dublin. You know, you look at the Darpris Connector and other projects that had a lot of false starts that never were developed in the original timelines that had been set out for construction. So I really do feel that's an important process for any body that wants to genuinely make a positive impact on how quickly we can build this climate-friendly infrastructure and put it in place, given the situation we're in today. And obviously speeding up the process is absolutely key, and trying to get rid of some of the roadblocks that have impinged the development of new public transport infrastructure in the state now for, frankly, decades. So that is absolutely crucial. In terms of Dublin Bus as well, I just want to ask, in relation to the development of arterial infrastructure, which is a big point that I'm focusing on throughout today's committee appearances, you know, what are Dublin Bus planning on doing to try and get cars off the road and practically onto your current existing infrastructure once you go beyond the M50? I think it's so important and it's so often missed. You know, I know Anne Graham was saying the NTA are going to be developing new park and ride facilities, but quite frankly, you know, it's such an easy opportunity to procure ground on a lot of the arterial routes. So effectively, those of us who don't have the luxury in places like Dublin and indeed Cork and my own area, which is not under the remit of Dublin Bus, are able to effectively leave their car outside of the city centres, board public transport that will bring us into, you know, places of work and places of retail within Dublin, and you know, particularly sporting venues as well. I think we have a really, really good opportunity there to utilise that. So if Dublin Bus has anything to say in that matter, if that's okay.
Deputy O'Connor, is there a question you'd like to put to the witnesses?
Chairperson, sorry, I lost that. Your microphone there was off.
Is there a question you'd like the witnesses to deal with? Is there a specific item you want to witness?
The specific question there in the end, Chairperson, is just in relation to the provision of park and ride, as the CEO of the NTA was referring to in our previous session. I wouldn't mind if there was some provision could be given by Dublin Bus in relation to you know, what they envisage to try and take cars off of the arterial routes. So that was the question I put there at the end. If it's okay if we could get a response to that, I'd appreciate it.
Yeah, Mr. Coyne.
Okay, thanks for the question. The park and ride ultimately be a decision for the NTA in terms of where they're located, what scale they're at, and how they will introduce those. So They could introduce them in terms of fully private operational, or they could introduce them as state-owned, state-managed. Dublin Bus's view on park and ride is that they have a role to play. We'd welcome an opportunity to use their experience to deliver those, but primarily what you require in park and ride, but also in all the suburbs for the areas that are coming into the city. What our customers want is they want frequent services, they want reliable services and punctual services, and they need to be a better alternative to the car. So what we are looking to do, increase the frequency services, have them very punctual in terms of on time and reliable that they will turn up. You also need to have them at a journey time minimum equal to a private mode. You need to set the fare correctly, and you need to have the park and ride facility that's a good, secure location, and it's a welcoming environment for to attract people out of their cars. So we believe that they will be, if they're positioned well and fully funded, a great part of an integrated public transport system. That will also have to penalise private mode use, because we are all battling for the same road space. So our view would be that you could have a 1,000 car park and ride facility somewhere out in Meath, but if it takes you 2 hours to get in the bus and an hour in the car, you're still going to drive your car. So I think that would be our kind of overall sense of park and ride, that they can be very, very successful if they are part of an integrated transport system. And Dublin Bus, we would have operated them many a year ago, and people would remember Operation Free Flow, and you park and ride at the Spa in Lucan, you had them out in Stillorgan, you had them in Whitehall. And they were very successful because they were faster than the private car mode, and they were extremely cheap. So we'd like to see Dublin Bus play a role in that, and look forward to the NTA making provision for those within their transport ecosystem.
Okay, that's fascinating. I really feel that would make a big difference for anybody living in rural Ireland, because this thing is often, I had a couple of people tweeting me while I was here asking me why I'm not using public transport to get to and from Dublin. Quite frankly, the answer is it adds an hour and a half to my journey. To actually go to the train station, park my car, get the train to Dublin, and then have to commute from the train station in Dublin into my place of work. And when you're in a job like this, I can't afford to be losing 3 hours potentially in a working day. And that's the case for many others that have to come to Dublin for work, whether they're doing it once or twice in the week. There are thousands upon thousands of people, just like myself, that have to come to the city partially as part of their role in their job. And the integration of the bus routes that Dublin Bus are operating, and it's an excellent service overall, and there is obviously scope for improvement there, and I want to compliment you. When it comes to taking cars off the road outside of the city limits, outside beyond the M50, I really think there's such scope there to ultimately change totally the interaction between transport inside Dublin and outside, and effectively taking more and more cars off of the roads that are coming into the city centre, and effectively blocking up space that's needed for the introduction of mobility infrastructure for cycling and walking. I referenced, Paris in particular. It's one city I've been in, and it's a really enjoyable experience to use their public transport, but also when it comes to cycling and mobility, they've done phenomenal work under the mayor they have there at the moment to improve that. And I think that we can do that in Ireland, but effectively we do have to address all of the traffic that's coming in from the arterial routes in and out of Dublin City, and that could be done by the investment in the park and ride infrastructure. And there's some disagreement. Some people feel that it's a half thought out solution, because effectively you are not ruling out the car completely. Yeah. But effectively, if you're living in a rural house or in a small town and village, you're just not going to have the same level of services you're going to have living in a major town. Whether you're I'm just trying to think of one really that's outside of a town outside Dublin that would not have the rail infrastructure in place at the moment. But like effectively, if you're in a town of 5,000 or 6,000 people, like so many people in the arterial towns around Dublin that don't have the rail infrastructure, you're going to have a relatively decent bus service, but that's not going to be available in rural areas, and particularly in smaller towns and villages. So that's something I'd love to see more work being done on that. And the one other thing, it's just an observation and a bugbear for me, this referral always back to the NTA that they said policy. Well, it's quite interesting, because when you put the questions to the NTA, they can't give you a straight answer, and that is absolutely unacceptable. And it's something we have to effectively deal with. Okay. We need strategy being put in place that we can put questions to civil servants that can give us answers. They're paid well enough, and that point is to be made.
Thanks a lot, Deputy O'Connor. We'll now move to Deputy Stephen Matthews. Deputy Matthews, about 5 or 6 minutes.
Thank you, Gerlach. I want to welcome Mr. Coyne, Mr. Jose and Ms. Morrissey today. And thank you for your attendance and your opening statements. I have 2 questions for Mr. Coyne and 2 questions for DCC. Interesting to hear you talk about 30 years ago, the first bus lane going into operation. 30 years ago, I was working in Donnybrook Bus Garage, putting in the first electronic ticketing machines back then. And we're still talking. It took me 30 years to get here and to get you before the committee. Yes, well, I think there's a statute of limitations on conflicts of interest, is there? But that was the first electronic ticketing machine we were putting in at the stage. And I would compliment Dublin Bus, the advancement in the fleet and the service and everything around the Dublin Bus service over the last 30 years. For people who haven't travelled on bus in quite a while, I would recommend the Triton services. On the bus routes I use, very frequent and very good level of service. But things change, and we know the population grew. We know we're running into, commuter chaos out there and congested roads. So the new routes where you've brought it in under Bus Connects, where people have to change buses, where they were used to getting on a bus, finding their seat, and ending at their destination. In a number of cases in Bus Connects, it's going to be a two-stage journey. You're going to have to get off the bus and change buses. From my understanding from Bus Connect, it's going to give higher frequencies, more reliability of service. For that, it'll also give greater flexibility of places to go. What do we need to do to convince people that's how a modern bus service works? If you got a train into another city and you got off and you realised you had to take 2 buses to a destination, but it was a good journey time, you wouldn't think twice about it. So how do we make that transition from people who are used to the 1 bus route that meandered all around the houses to the 2 journeys, much quicker, more direct? What can we do to ease that transition? Sorry, my second question is, when can I expect the 155 to go 24-hour?
I figure that might have been on the
sorry,
list.
I have a third question. I have a third question as well, sorry, for Dublin Bus. We had a really good session in here a while ago based on a TII report called Travelling in a Woman's Shoes, and it was about vulnerable users on public transport. And the location of bus shelters, do you work with local authorities or other sort of landscape input to say the location of our bus stop, it creates a kind of security issue? It's in a dark area, it's not well lit, there's overgrowth, there's landscape. Do you work with a number of people like that to make sure that those destinations for people, because we have example in that report of women saying that I don't get off at the bus stop that I normally get off at, I get off at the next one because it's safer and I walk further distance. So is that something that Dublin Bus looks at actively, the security for users out there? And I'll come back to the DCC then with the questions then. Okay,
thanks, Deputy. So I was reminded while I was here that it was actually 42 years ago we had our first bus lane, so 1980. So okay. the years passed me, and I probably bumped into you. I was in Donnybrook 33 years ago, so we probably crossed paths back then. But in terms of the network, so the network design, looked at the NTA. We assisted the NTA, but it's an NTA-led network redesign. They're in charge of that statutorily. So we would have worked with them. Around the interchange, a lot of queries were brought up around that at the start. So through the public consultation process, they did adjust some of the initial proposals, and particularly for peak times, so that, recognising people kind of are in a hurry in a morning and evening peak, so they want to go more direct. So where they have introduced the first couple of spines, there are significant peak time only services which are kind of end to end. But in terms of convincing people that getting 2 buses instead of 1 to a destination is a better alternative, very hard to convince somebody that had 1 bus. And I'll go back to the 3 points, and you mentioned 2 of them, but it's frequency, reliability and punctuality. So everything else after that is a nice to have for a public transport user. If you get the 3 of those, then you've got a good service. And the one thing is that you have a higher frequency for more customers. So on the spines where you've got the main road, so essentially inside the M50, you've got more frequency of service on the corridor. So and a lot of your customers are in there, so they don't have to interchange anyway. The other piece, and part of this is making the whole system better than the one individual journey they may have done. So part of that is a significant increase in orbital services and localised services. So where somebody might have to make a journey, and there are customers there that do now have to take 2 buses instead of 1. But you're also offering them increased orbital movement, so you don't have to go into the city if you don't want to. So if you want to go from Blanche to Tala, you can jump on a frequent bus there, similar on the south and the north of the city. So what you're trying to do is broaden it out and say, here's a greater package of public transport options in totality for the vast majority of people. When you change a bus network, some people are going to be disaffected, there's no question. And what we're trying to do is minimise that, and the NTA have done the public consultation, and I think the first couple of corridors that they've introduced have been broadly welcomed, and I think in time we will, some of those issues may have to be looked at again in the future, where the interchange penalty is too significant, and you try and remediate that by giving peak-only services or making some adjustments. So, but it is, yes, it's kind of, some networks in the city will have that, others will have what we would traditionally have here, and try and minimise interchange. But I think with the increased frequency and the increased orbital options, you're now in a position to say, look, you know, that one journey might be kind of a bit sticky for you, but you've got additional journeys now that bring you to more places, you know, education, school, jobs. So that's what's been tried to be done. We tried to sell that as a whole package. In terms of the 155, unfortunately I haven't got a date for you yet, Deputy, but the investment will determine when the 24-hour services and the 155 come in, and the NTA. You know, it's their decision ultimately, but from our point of view, you don't need any additional buses because they're there at midnight, so they'll be parked up in the garage. You do need additional drivers, and we have a good campaign. Get thanked for living out there at the minute, which is going well, attracting employees. So, and that's an investment piece, and touched on it earlier with multi-year funding. So I can't tell you what services we'll be introducing next year. I can tell you what aspirations are there, but I couldn't tell you definitively. But the 155, 46A, they are routes that are planned for 24-hour reduction in an early phase. And we believe those should be done as soon as the resource requires. We do have bus connects, and I'd caution against holding everything off till the bus routes are changed, because, you know, bus connects will take 2 to 3 years, so, you know, you could introduce things in advance and then make adjustments in 2 or 3 years anyway. So, but it would be a route that we think would be a good success, 24 hours. And then the TII report. So the NTA have responsibility for bus shelters, and the bus network Dublin Bus used to, but that responsibility is transferred to the NTA. But we would feed our views into safe public transport, and generally they're well-lit areas where there's high footfall, and it's just an insight. Your question is a great one, because it is an insight into the complexity around the bus network, around stop locations, and moving one stop has a significant implication on other stops around. So there would be areas where we would have removed bus stops because some dynamic changes. So the lighting might change, the infrastructure around it might change, where a road goes in, all of a sudden the bus is isolated. So we would take that into account, but the NTA will be the authority for that. But they would ask us around our advices around relocations to certain areas. But we will be conscious when we are planning routes and implementing bus stops. We are conscious of the surrounding environment. Just, you'd like it, it's our service for our customers, so you'd like it to be a pleasant experience everywhere.
No, I think it's important, and you're right, the reliability, frequency, punctuality, and I think also added to that is security and affordability then obviously is that other factor, and comfort as well, to make it the full package. Thanks, Mr. Coyne. For DCC, we talked about road space allocation in the last session with the NTA, and I don't know if you heard that. It creates some of the biggest conflicts in communities when you try to take away a few parking spaces away, that there'll be a greater benefit for all by removing some of these spaces, by having a little bit of road space allocation for cycle lane, for all the reasons, for environment, for health, for permeability, for everybody involved. How do we ensure that the positive voices are heard as well? Because these campaigns can spiral and take off with negativity, and it seems like everybody's against it. And the people who are positive and in favour of a lot of these campaigns, they remain silent. They're the silent majority out there who know it's the right thing to do, but don't want to get dragged into Twitter or Facebook rows. So how do we include people from the very, very start in that process? Because we've seen Lucan, for example. Like, that was, to me, that was just epitomised the problem that we have. I saw Salt Hill as well. I had similar in Bray. We try to do these things, and you know, they're for the greater good. But we just it seems to get out of control. So in your perspective, how do we get more positive voices involved in these campaigns?
Thank you, Deputy. I think there is a job of work to win hearts and minds at a national level and indeed at a local community level as well. And certainly there are divisive examples, as you've illustrated. I think it's about illustrating case studies of where, you know, where there are positives, you know, when these changes have been made, and I think illustrating the benefits to a broad spectrum of members of the community, and you know, demonstrating, you know, how this could work well in other community settings. So I think it's around addressing the fears, preempting the concerns and addressing them. And I think there's been a challenge around consultation where there have been kind of a vocal minority of, you know, more car-centric members of the community. And I think there's an opportunity to engage with a broader range of community members proactively from the outset, rather than it being a passive open consultation and expecting time-poor members of the community to take part. I wonder, is there an opportunity to do more outreach work to understand where people are coming from and to preempt their concerns before they escalate?
Yeah, you're absolutely right in saying that there is, you know, sometimes a vocal majority who do want the changes, but they don't speak out, because most people don't speak out about things that they, you know, approve on, which is kind of why we were set up. During the Metrolink consultations and the Bus Connect consultations, we believed that a lot of people wanted to see this project built as soon as possible and didn't want to get engaged. Now, there were a lot of valid concerns that needed to be fixed, and most of them have been addressed. But, you know, there was a vocal majority, a silent majority who wanted to build it as soon as possible, and there was no voice for them, and that's kind of why we formed. So, more community advocacy groups, more people who engage in local communities and across Dublin on how to deliver these projects would be good.
I just fail to see how we're going to tackle climate emissions when that's the reaction that we get. And I really do think that the people who have to make the decisions, which is often local councillors, if they knew they have more support out there for these projects from those people that do see the benefit in them, I think it might assist them in trying to make a difficult decision. Lastly, you talked about the ambition in the Greater Dublin Area strategy, and we all have a higher ambition for transport out there. We would all like to see more railings, more Lewis lines, more bus lines. There is a reality that certain infrastructural projects do take a lot of time and they do take a lot of money. They also take cross-governmental time periods, so you need a consistent support and funding for them. So while I agree with you, we should have higher targets and higher ambition, and we want to deliver this quicker, there has to be a reality as well that you lose all faith in all systems then if somebody says, we'll have this done in 10 years or we'll have this done in 5 years, knowing that it's not going to happen in 5 years. So you have to run that risk of the reality of putting a date on it, capacity constraints that we have within even design, in construct, and to go out to planning, consultancies on these things. These all take time. So my worry is, yes, I think you're right, further ambition, more ambition, quicker, faster, more. We know we need to move because transport feeds into our climate chaos. So, but we have to kind of balance that with the reality of saying that's the realistic timeline on something.
Okay.
No, and I agree with you, but we can't afford them to fail. So, where do we go from here? So, more resources. We need more.
I don't
so
know.
In terms
of resources are being used.
So look at the Darpris Tunnel. It was supposed to be constructed by 2030, before 2035. So now it'll be designed by 2042. So, you know, if we're kicking projects that are, you know, 15 years away down the line now, it's not going to happen. You know, we still need that pipeline. We need to build up that pipeline now. We need to start designing those now to be constructed in the 2030s, when it looks like it'll be, or the late 2030s at least, it'll be a fairly quiet time if you look at the strategy. So we need to be, yeah, I agree with you that it's not good if you have the strategies and then don't deliver on it, but now it looks like we're kind of taking away some projects which could have been delivered or could have been designed right now to be delivered at a later phase. which isn't helpful either.
Yeah, I think that's an omission for me. Dart Underground, there was a 3 billion price tag on that at the time. There was a really good cost benefit to cost ratio on it at the time as well, and it was shelved. And for me, the party that shelved it had no interest in railways. I'll leave it at that, Madam Chair.
My problem is that I have 5 members looking, 2 members and 3 non-members. I'm conscious of time, we're way over time, and yet I want to be fair to people.
Thanks, Chair.
So I'd ask them to zone in on questions, right? Ask questions, because, you know, the other stuff you can do elsewhere. So just on the time. So I'm conscious I have 2 members, so I have to give some latitude. With the non-members, I'll have to be just conscious of time, right? So Senator Harkin, then followed by Deputy O'Murrow, then followed by Deputy Emer Higgins, followed by I'm going to get my head around this now. Yeah, followed by Senator Mary Siri Carney, and then by Senator Emer Curry. So Senator Jerry Harkin.
Thanks, Kerr. Look, and I'll try and be as brief as I can, despite the fact I'm the only Dublin member of the committee in the room.
No, you're missing. I'm giving you latitude.
No, I know you were, and that's something. But I'm still going to try and be brief. But it is a topic very close to, as the only member of the committee actually living in Dublin, discussing the Greater. And I expect the Greater Dublin Area is bigger than that. I get that to everybody else, but it certainly affects the Dublin people.
I hope we're all welcome visitors to Dublin. We use it quite often.
Every week, every day, and everybody uses the service in Dublin. Dublin is a facility for everybody. But as somebody who is living it, and
there is a lot happening outside the Pale as well. But we like coming up here.
And we'll discuss that next week. But particularly to say, first of all, to Dublin Bus, just to thank Dublin Bus, and not just you, Mr. Coyne, but for all your 3,600 staff members who do so much. And it's only the problems we ever hear about. It's only the issues that something goes wrong that I end up bringing you or one of your team. When things are going well, which is 99.99% of the time, we just take it for granted. It's when that bus goes missing on the RTPI or something goes wrong or whatever. And it is rare, but it happens. I suppose just in terms of, you made a reference to the Brexit challenge. I wasn't sure what the Brexit challenge, particularly for your industry or for your company, as you might allude to that. In terms of the fuel, I mean, obviously fuel is massively increasing in cost. Just you might address how you're dealing with that. Antisocial behaviour, I'm just giving you some points that you might refer back to, because I don't want to go into speeches too much. Antisocial behaviour and how you're dealing with that, and how much of a problem it is or it isn't. I know when I was in London, probably 3 or 4 years ago at this stage, I could tap my credit card in the London Underground. I didn't need to have a Leap card. And I was amazed that they knew when I tapped on and tapped off, they took the right fare, and they had no idea who I was. I hadn't registered for anything. Is that kind of what the mass thing is about, or are we anywhere near that? What are we going to see as users of Dublin Bus services in terms of technology upgrades? I mean, the Leap card is great, but are there maybe you might let us know the percentage of fares that are now collected by cash, because I'm sure it's falling to a very low percentage, and whether or not, I mean, I think there'll always have to be cash, but I'd just be interested to know how many. I know there was a time when we said, I remember campaigning for maybe every second or third 46A could be cashless, and you said, well, we'd lose money at that time. Now, I think the world has moved on. In terms of modal shift, what do you see we need to do for modal shift to get more people out of their cars, as much onto bikes and onto footpaths as on scooters and as onto buses? When is your fleet going more electric and hydrogen-wise and out of fossil fuels? And just the age of the fleet generally. I mean, I see the odd. I used to be on a bus route that used to have the oldest buses because it had the least amount of gradient, and they said that they broke down less on our route than any other route. And that's 20, 30 years ago, probably when Deputy Matthews was installing electronic machines on them. But you know, you do see brand new buses, but you also see buses that are kind of probably a little bit older than we might think they are. So maybe just let us maybe touch on those points if you can, please. I just threw a load of points at you there rather than make a long speech. So
thank you, Senator. Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
And thanks for the kind comments on the team at Dublin Bus, and I'll make sure that's fed back, Senator. Just in terms of Brexit, so probably the main issue is around supply chain. So we've obviously a lot of vehicles, over 1,000, and a lot of parts. And that was kind of through COVID, so we had to kind of reroute and plan to reroute all the parts over a land bridge. Well, not over a land bridge, but
and they're generally British-built buses, are they?
Yes. Yeah. So, and then there's kind of rules around components and stuff. So that was a significant challenge, but our procurement department and our finance team met that head on, and there was no impact on service delivery of that. The other part of that is obviously cost. So that increase your cost base because parts are more expensive and your lead-in times are longer. And we have to engage with the NTA on managing that. And obviously, money that's going into your supply chain is money no longer available for additional services. So that was the main issue. In terms of our fuel, we're part of the CIE group, so we have a hedging policy around fuel. So state organisation, we're risk averse when it comes to predicting the prices of fuel because we're not in the business of making some profit on fuel margins. We're in the business of trying to minimise the cost to the exchequer and maintain continuity of supply. So we have that, and again, with our contract with the NTA, there's recognition in there around the fuel requirements. So through COVID, we used less fuel because less services out there and less people on them, so you didn't use as much fuel. So we were able to discount back to the NTA what would have been the cost of additional fuel. So it goes back to the state when we're very efficient on that.
When your costs go up, the NTA give you more money to make up for the cost, that is?
There's engagement with the contract with the NTA, yes, but they do accept that the fuel hedging is something that we should do with them, and they have accepted that in the contract. So, but there's a big increase, so we have to see where that goes. Senator, in terms of the antisocial behaviour, we have a long track record in Dublin Bus of tackling antisocial behaviour. We'd be quite proud of the work we've done in this area for over 35 years now. We do a lot of engagement with young kids in schools, so we've dedicated schools coordinators who will be drivers, but their full-time role will be going out into schools with buses, with Dublin Fire Brigade, with An Garda Síochána, talking to the school kids at a young age. Generally, that type of antisocial behaviour might be stone throwing or kid chucking a tennis ball or something like that. There are some incidents where it's, you might have something a little more serious, but thank God they're very, very few and far between. Great engagement with the local communities in these areas that we would particularly engage in, and that has seen a huge reduction. We also have CCTV in our buses, so there's 12 or 13 cameras in every bus. And we also promote our services and working with locally elected officials as well. And over the last 30 years, it's very, very minor number of incidents on our buses.
And in terms of on the buses as opposed to directed at the buses, are there very small?
On the buses, extremely low numbers. And like there was, I suppose there was one a couple of weeks ago which made news on social media. And the fact that made such big news on social media is kind of telling because it's rare. And that's probably the best thing you could say around a terrible incident. But it's very, very rare that it happens. And, some people would say, well, look, late at night, and I've been on night links for years and years. People are happy out, going home on a night link. So
I think it's important that we actually articulate that point because it's the kind of thing that does put certain people either away from going on it or stops them re-engaging with it.
Yeah, I think when you look at the urban bus and Dublin Bus in particular, every customer who gets on a bus has to pass a bus driver. And they'll say hello, or the bus driver will say hello, but they know that the bus driver is there. And we have great engagement in Garda Síochána. We have emergency pedal on the bus if they're required, and it's very rare that it's required. So very calm environment, and the comfort that customers have from a driver being physically present. And yeah, it's so I think great strides have been made, and CCTV is part of that. But particularly our work with the schools coordinators, because we're nudging behaviour from a young age, and that filters up through the system. So that's quite strong. Yeah, the pay with your debit card in London, that's account-based ticketing, which the NTA are bringing in as part of our next generation ticketing project. That's kind of in the zone of mass, but it'll be done on its own right. So you can pay, depends what the NTA requests, but your bank card, a Garmin Pay, Apple Watch, it could be anything, your phone.
And it'll take into account the €2 and the €2.30 and all those discounts and the fare cap per day and per week and all that. That's all part of it.
You just get on the bus. It could be any token. You get on the bus. You do your journeys through the day, through the week, and it dynamically updates. So if you just did one journey and it's €1 fare, it'll charge €1. But if you did like 20 journeys, and it's going to be €2 or whatever, it'll charge you that after the event. So it'll always give you the cheapest fare. So,
And that's what, 4 or 5 years away?
no, they've started the tender process, so that's commenced. So
Okay.
2023, 24, see it rolled out in buses. Just on the tech upgrades, ticketing, for sure. We've our USB chargers. I think the technology, the biggest technology piece would be the electrification. So the ticketing and the electrification would be significant benefits for the customer. And they'd be the next ones. Look, the next piece would be that you can put your phone on the back of the seat and, watch your Netflix or whatever you want on your very fast journey home, which would be an aspiration. In terms of cash versus cashless, tipping to 90% cashless, which is great. It will be a government political decision to go cashless, and that's what we see in other jurisdictions. So you might get it down to your kind of 2% through heavily discounting cashless and ramping up. That then becomes a political decision around, some people don't have the money to have credit in a leap card and they only want to do a journey twice a year or something. So, but that, you're essentially in the zone now where very quickly that decision would need to be made if that was the aspiration to go cashless.
And would that save you a significant amount of cost in terms of security and all the other cash handling costs that are there?
Well, not significant. It would save money but what you still have to do is you still have to give every customer on the bus a ticket. So proof of travel, you need to know what your loading is. So you still have to do that. But what it would save is you don't have to collect cash, bring it to a bank, get them. There's bank charges there. There's some staff things. So, but it's not like that. I wouldn't be coming to government saying, look, you'll save a whole chunk of change if we go cashless. I think the social.
It's naturally going that way anyway.
Yeah. Well, and the social aspect around the cost benefit will be required.
Can I just before we have to go there by 5:15. I want to be fair to everyone.
Well, I'm just going to thank Mr. Coyne for it, but I do want to just acknowledge the huge amount of work being done by the Commuter Coalition.
With your respect, right, I'm trying to actually accommodate everyone, right? Our problem is our meeting was supposed to finish at 4:30. I've left to go on. I'm coming under pressure from the clerk. We have to finish at 5:15.
I accept that, and I'm conscious. I've been here since 1:30 or 1 o'clock for the private meeting, and it is a particularly relevant topic to me. And I just want to thank the Commuter Coalition. I could engage with you for 20 minutes, and maybe I will do that, but obviously not on camera and not available. The couple of points. There was a point about BRT. I'd love to come back to you at some point on where BRT is going. I think there's scope for park and ride in places like Leopardstown Racecourse, Punchestown Racecourse. The car parks are already there, and except for the odd day when there's racing, there's a lot of scope there to be using existing park and ride type spaces, including in built-up urban areas and outside them. On the Commuter Coalition, I'm very delighted. I thought I was fighting a lone battle about the upgrade of the metro to Sandyford, so thankfully I found somebody else who's not decided that that's a terrible thing. It's a positive thing. Somebody who lives very close to the Dundrum stop. The amount of development in Dundrum, Sandyford and even out to Cherrywood is enormous, and it really does need that upgrade. I had a point about network design. It's not you don't do the network design, the NTA do the network design. You just operate the network that's designed by them. And again, just to thank you, Chairman. I wish I had more time, and it's hopefully a topic we can come back to again, where those of us who are very involved in the Dublin strategy on a daily basis, all day, every day. And thank you for that.
Thanks, Senator. Deputy Morrissey, please.
Right, look, I'll be as quick as possible. Mr. Coyne, look, obviously Anne Graham was in here from the NTA earlier, and she spoke about the account-based ticketing system, and she said, right, tendering started. So she said a couple of years. I'm assuming it's going to be closer to 2024 than it is to 2023. And just beyond that, obviously why I was asking is because we had hoped that there would be a short-term fix in relation to a tax saver ticketing system that would suit someone who's working 2 or 3 days a week or whatever. And we're being told it can't be until this account-based ticketing system is in. I'm just going to ask you your view in relation to that and the possible timeline, if there's any way of speeding this up or looking at even as I say, a simplified solution, even if it is using something prehistoric. And then just where things are on the, as regards technological improvements that are possible as regards particularly AI and data analytics. I'm assuming on the basis of what you said about bus drivers, you'll not be going for self-driving vehicles in the near future.
Thank you, Deputy. Yeah, just
Just asking Mr. Klein to be precise. We are very tight.
yeah, absolutely. Look, the procurement, we can send the data on. The NTA run that procurement process. It has commenced, and yes, I would imagine it's at the latter end of 2023. But the NTA will be able to give you those guidelines in terms of what their projected planning is. But state body, a lot of that will be dictated by what comes back from a tendering competition. The tax saver, I was here for the earlier conversation. That is solely in the remit of the NTA, and the prehistoric bit is, yes, everything can be done, but where there's a will.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. A willingness could get around some of these issues.
Yeah, the AI data analytics, there's always a place for innovation, and yeah, I mean, we'll always have bus drivers, but there are certain areas where you would trial the new technology. For example, you'd have them in some areas where they'd be localised and within the confines of depots, etc. So, and that would not be unusual in emerging technology. So you'd see them in ports and stuff like that. So buses are parking up.
But we're only talking testing phase and.
Oh yeah.
No.
Like there's
no
we've
timeline.
no plans to. Yeah, our drivers are our core competency. They're excellent employees, and we've no plans to.
Oh no, well I wasn't talking about.
them.
I was talking about the use of obviously AI and data analytics in relation to like improvements that could be made rather than replacing.
No, AI and data analytics. We've commenced a data strategy, and we do a lot of data analytics on our passenger demand movements, and so yeah, we'll continue to invest in that. Thank you.
Now, I'm going to push. I'm going to get into trouble, and people will be aware. I'm the Dáil. I'm expecting people to hold to their time. I've lost time myself. On many occasions, people have eaten at time. So I would ask, there's 5 minutes each. So I'm going to ask the 3 remaining members to stick rigidly to that. We're going to 20 past. There's another committee meeting starting here at 25 at half past. So first up is Deputy Emer Higgins, followed by Senator Mary Sarah Carney, followed by Senator Emer Curry. So Deputy Higgins.
Thank you, Chair. I know I've limited time, so I'm going to ask
So
just
5 minutes.
2 questions.
5 minutes. That's 4, 5.
Yeah, no problem. I'm going to ask just 2 questions of Mr. Ray Coyne and make one comment in relation to DCC. But I do also just want to put on the record a very important point in response to a total misrepresentation of my community in Lucan, which just happened here. Over 7,000 of whom did exactly what was asked of them, engage in a public consultation on the redesign of Lucan Village Green, and just because they didn't give the views that the previous speaker wanted to hear doesn't mean that their views aren't valid, and I for one am proud that Fine Gael stood beside the people of Lucan, listened to them and came up with a solution whereby the Village Green will be redeveloped, and it'll be done in an appropriate way that doesn't have a negative impact on businesses or those driving to enjoy the village. Mr. Coyne, just I suppose in relation to your statement today, thank you so much, and it's great to see that there is such a modern, dynamic and solutions orientated, as you put it, team of 3,600 people, and I'd just like to thank all of them for everything that you do on a day-to-day basis, but in particular for what was done during the pandemic, which was a very scary time for everybody, and you continue to provide an essential service, and I think I'd just like that noted. My own background is in the corporate world, so I'm very familiar with workforce planning and retention and recruitment strategies, and I know that you're embarking on quite a high-profile, aggressive hiring campaign at the moment, and I'd just love to hear a little bit about your hiring plans and your retention strategies for, in particular, your maintenance technicians and also your drivers, who I'm sure are often being targeted by the public sector because they're being, or by the private sector because they've been so well trained. And then from a climate change perspective, which is something we spoke quite a lot about in this session and in the previous session as well, I'm just wondering if there is further plans for electrification of your fleet, and if there is, it's something I brought up before on a visit to Donnybrook Garage, where I've spoken with some of your colleagues. I think there's huge opportunity on the outskirts of Dublin for I suppose a new depot which would provide that level of turning power, that level of being able to charge, which could obviously take a little bit longer in somewhere like Grange Castle in my community. And also just to DCC, just to say, the main message I've gotten from you guys is around the timings and the fact that the timings have been lagging. And I totally understand where you're coming from that, and I really do share your views. And as a government TD, that's something I will continue to advocate for, and I'm happy to work with you guys on.
Mr. Coyne.
2.5 minutes, right?
I'll be brief. Thank you, Deputy, and thank you for the kind words for our employees. I'll feed that back. And they were exceptional during the pandemic and continue to be. Which brings you on to our retention strategy for our employees. I suppose the main aspects that we focus on our employees is we have a purpose that is very well respected in the organisation, and that's serving the public. And we advise our employees of that and remind them of that. And we're very proud of that as our employees. We respect all our employees. We do offer them good paying conditions and reward them with good paying conditions. And we also offer them a career. So I've been on Dublin Bus since I've been 18. They're 33 years. It's a great organisation. And we offer significant opportunity for employees. But we do have market forces. We're like any commercial state body. We have market forces that dictate what is and isn't acceptable. We do have challenges, particularly in our maintenance grade, from other organisations who would pay significantly more. And so we have apprenticeship schemes in place, and we continue to provide the best terms and conditions that we can, and we believe are market leading within that, respecting the excellent work that they do. And you said it yourself, Deputy, people are coming after our employees because they are the best in the business, and it's our job to retain them, and we do a good job on that. So hopefully, and our campaign, Get Thanked for a Living, is built upon that and we've got some great feedback on that and really positive. Just on the climate electrification, we'll have some new buses coming in this year. The NTA will purchase those. All our depots will go full electrification over a planned timeline, so we're out to tender on the first phase of that. We are also exploring new depots, so a depot strategy on existing depots and future depots. And we did have a site in Grange Castle about 15 to 20 years ago, but it is an area that we'll be looking at southwest Dublin because there's some attractive areas there with regards to new depots. And again, they would be built full electrification and hydrogen. We'll see where the market goes. So, yeah, hopefully that answers your questions, Deputy. Thank you.
Okay. So, Senator Mary Siri Carney, 5 minutes. So
thank you very much.
Doing well. Yeah.
First of all, I also want to congratulate your staff. I think they've been extraordinary through all of this time. I have a sister-in-law who's a former driver and inspector, and so we've heard all the stories all the years. Very quickly, I suppose, to what extent do you get an input into the network redesign?
Yeah, okay. Thank you for the kind words again for the employees, and I'll make sure that's fed back, and it is most welcome. Yeah, so the NTA, statutory responsibility for the network redesign. They employed a consulting house to assist them with that. Dublin Bus fed into and advised and guided the NTA on what our views would have been around the changes. We did a network redesign in 2010, 2011, 2012. So we've expertise in that area, and we assisted the NTA with the public consultation. So we went out with the NTA because they're our customers, but at the same time, the NTA are responsible for it. So, and we did advise on changes, and a lot of that advice was taken on board, and so as was a lot of the public's advice, so the network that is being implemented is quite significantly different than the original one. So in fairness to public consultation, it did change. And we'll continue to advise them. But we are not the decision makers.
But you have input. You're
we do
not
have
decision
input.
makers, but you
do have input.
You have, and your input makes a difference?
I believe our input is valued because we are experts in the area, and
I would have thought it's instrumental.
We have seen, and we've kind of, yeah, I think both parties understand the skill sets that we have when we align together in implementing key state infrastructure projects. So, yeah.
I suppose in the context of, let's say, the changes on the C-spine and the effect that that's had on the community in Chapel Izzard, I would be very disappointed that the community in Chapel Izzard haven't been heard in relation to that, and consequently there are up to 170 extra car journeys a week because they were denied their connectivity with their schools. Can you give me an idea on a timeline for the implementation of the AD, F and G spines? And are they dependent on Bus Connects, or are you going? I mean, the C spine has gone ahead without the infrastructure, crucially, the Part 8 that's needed for the bus stops for Chapel, is it? But I suppose I'm just wondering, roughly speaking, when are we talking about A, D, F and G, which would particularly directly impact the constituency of Dublin South Central?
I'll have to come back to you on the actual dates
I
on them,
appreciate
because
that.
so they will be implemented regardless of the infrastructure.
Okay.
So there are planned timelines for every route. Already the NTA set them, they are out there. We've 3 phases this year to implement. So regardless of infrastructure, the route changes can happen.
Okay.
If the investment is there, they will happen. So because it is a significant investment. So look, I'll come back to you. There's a whole programme, and I can send that on to you, and you can
I really
take every
appreciate
route. So
that, okay,
apologies.
and I'll engage with you out of this. Just to, there are a number of 24/7 bus gates being implemented. Do you get an input into that, or the criteria for saying, yes, this should be a 24/7 bus gate?
Bus gate or bus route?
Bus gate. In the Bus Connects region. So, for instance, you have some areas where the local knowledge would be that they're very quiet outside of rush hour, Monday to Friday, and yet the proposal is for a 24/7 bus gate.
It would be discussed with us, but we're not the decision makers.
Okay, I hear you. And I'm very good. So thank you very much, and I will re-engage with you, or engage with you. I suppose I would have 2 things. One, Metro Southwest. Obviously, the leaders in that are Pauline Foster and Sean Ward, and many of the residents' associations are within my own home constituency of Dublin South Central. Very supportive, huge population being left without adequate public transport, in my view, even with Bus Connects that's at full. So I'm in full support of that, and I note that you are as well. So I'd welcome your comments on that. And lastly, I suppose a little bit aligned to what Deputy Higgins has said. People articulating their real concerns that their quality of life is going to be seriously diminished doesn't mean they're not very supportive of public transport, and they're not very supportive. So I think that the two aren't mutually exclusive, and it's really important. I think the wrong message could have come out of this meeting, to be perfectly honest, and I'd be disappointed in that. People are entitled. In my area, there are 3 corridors that are going to absolutely cripple what are now strictly residential areas, and their voices are not being heard. And if they raise them or express them, they're actually jumped on by a lot of the lobbyists that are out there. It doesn't mean they're anti-cycling, it doesn't mean they're anti any of those things. They're very much in favour of public transport, but they also need their quality of life. And I think that point needs to be made. People, not everybody is in opposition, but they have a right to lobby for their own quality of life.
You just addressed it, because that's coming up, that particular point, generally, right? I think everyone's pro-public transport, but you have people that may have lived in an area for their entire lives. So there needs to be that engagement, and it is coming into public discourse, polarisation. I have a major problem with it. It's a change in the political landscape in the last couple of years that I believe is not actually making for good decision-making around policy. Everyone's entitled to their view, but I think Senator Ciara Carney makes a very valid point that, you know, we have to see each other's point so we get to something that's workable. And, like, with your respect, Mr. Coyne, the NTA, in my dealings with them, they make the decisions on the routes, right? I would like to see Bus Éireann, your Dublin Bus, having much more engagement on it. The routes come down. So can I just go back? I just want to support.
Yeah, there's been less than desirable public consultation in a lot of
I'm
it.
just saying that there isn't enough. People take up fixed positions. When you take up fixed positions, in my experience, often it makes for poor decision-making, because might wins out, and that's not necessarily the best way to get to something that works. So you just address, I think, Senator Ciara Carney's point. You might just address that, Mr. Jose.
I suppose you're right in that a lot of opinions have become polarised in the last couple of years, and that's not good.
No.
We've engaged with a lot of communities on a lot of issues, and we've engaged in a lot of consultations on this, and we've tried to get, we're not happy with these plans most of the time either, you know, we get changes as well. So, like, it's good to have the public consultation, because we're also one of the people who benefit from it, because we're always looking for changes to these plans. Like, That's why I'm here. I'm looking to get more plans included in the transport strategy. On Metro South West, we are not against Metro South West. We would support Metro South West.
Yeah. No, I know that from your extensive
but we
work
want Metro South as well, which is the upgrade of the Lewis Green Line. You know, we don't want it to be an either-or situation. You know, take from Peter to give to Paul. We need both of them, and they're two very different projects with two very different complexities and budgets and so on. We regret the fact that for the Metro upgrade of Lewis Green Line, we got to a public consultation in 2018, and now it's post 2042, which is, you know, it's a very big change. On the Bus Connects thing, I have up-to-date implementation timelines from last week from the NTA. I can send that on to you.
Okay,
The
I'd really appreciate
routes.
that.
You want to make a quick comment, Mr. Coyne?
Yeah, just two things, Chairman. Your comment is well made, but Dublin Bus, as part of the public consultation for Bus Connects, we attended every single public consult with the NTA just to advise. And I was
But the
just going to
final
say,
arbitrators on the routes are the NTA.
correct, yes. And G will be this year. D and F is 2023 and A is 2024. So, okay, thank you, Chair.
Senator Curry.
So if we are going to encourage people out of their cars, we do have to make sure that we're giving them viable options, alternatives. The Dublin Airport, we have seen recently the possible introduction of set-down charges, and there has been spiralling car parking charges, but we know the timings on Metrolink. And in the area of Dublin 15, there's no direct bus link to the airport, and there isn't going to be one until 2024, and that is a big issue for the people in my area who really want a bus route. Can those links be prioritised sooner than 2024? Because we have a real issue here about people having options about how they get to the airport. That's my first question.
It's a fair comment, Senator, and again, the priority is laid out by the NTA. They determine which phases of Bus Connects come in, so the routes will be part of Bus Connects, and then it's on the investment that is available to the NTA from government. But I live in Dublin 15, and I would love a direct public transport service to the airport, but unfortunately, I'm not now in a position to be able to say to you, look, we can readjust timelines. That is a matter for the NTA. But it is good that there's recognition that those orbital routes, and we are implementing orbital routes now, and I think the success of the early ones may be an opportunity to show people that where there's new routes involved, additional passenger transport comes, and that is all modal shift. And that, you know, could be a point there to expedite orbital services.
Okay. Well, I did mention it to the NTA earlier on, but they didn't get a chance to respond. But I agree about orbital routes and the importance of orbital routes. You mentioned the orbital Lewis as well, and I think that is a lost opportunity. I did mention Lucan North earlier on, and Deputy Higgins looks after Lucan Village. Now, when you go over the Liffey, it's Lucan North. There's a pocket of Lucan there, and it is being left behind when it comes to bus services, because the bus services are now going down the Lucan Road in the village, and to get to the Lucan Road, it is a fair few kilometres walk from, say, the back of the estates in Lucan North, and the only option is a bus that comes once an hour, so it's not a viable option. So it's not an improvement for the community of Lucan North. I just, in relation to Mill Road in Blanchardstown as well, can you just clarify that the bus will, for B-Spine, will be connecting up with Connolly Hospital, and that will be a viable route for people that work in Connolly Hospital, the Children's Hospital there, and also at the hospice, because that is very important to the staff that they have better links from Connolly. And is it actually going under the underpass on Mill Road into Blanchardstown Village? If you could clarify that for me, please.
I'll come back to you on the Mill Road piece, because I know there's a low bridge there, so that would have been a consideration. There are new orbitals in there, so I'll come back on the exact detail around what the final plans are, because there are a lot of new services going into Blanche. and there's also some infrastructure change down at West End, which may facilitate access into the village in a different way. So I'll come back to you on that.
Okay. And can you come back about Lucan North
Yeah.
as well?
Is that Laracon, is it? Lucan North,
Sorry,
Laracon?
yes, Laracon.
Yeah.
Because, and this is, when I read your submission, I've mentioned the Liffey Valley Greenway and that was lost as an objective. But also, I'm not sure if you're aware, but as part of the Canal Loop project, there was to be a bridge over a new bridge at Lucan Bridge for cyclists and pedestrians, and understandably people don't want it on the view side of the weir, they want it on the other side, but for some reason that feedback has been taken on board, and the project has been dropped for the foreseeable future, as opposed to engaging with a bridge on the other side. So I think these solutions are soluble, so let's solve them.
And maybe any members that wish to communicate with either of you in terms of follow-up details, that could be arranged. We will bring in the chair designate. He had I think he was missing in action for a short period on the day. Technology issues, so we'll look to bring him in as quickly as we can. So with that, I'd like to thank Mr. Coyne, Mr. Jose and Ms. Morris, I hope I pronounced that correctly, attending today's engagement committee. Sorry about the time frame, we're just the dynamics in terms of times for committees. This meeting is now adjourned. The next meeting of the Joint Committee will be next Wednesday, the 11th of May at 1:30 p.m. Note, and that will be with the Irish Coast Guards. Yeah, dealing with the Irish. Thanks. Bye.